Welcome back to Custom Guns and Reloading. This will be our first video actually where we do some work on a lower. And I'm in the middle of converting a carbine length buffer tube on one of my lowers over to an A5 length slash BCM MK2 length tube, depending on which brand you buy. So I figured I would just film it and talk a little bit about tools and stuff before I actually get started here. So the first thing you need is an A5 length buffer system kit, or you can individually just buy the parts. I did a lot of research. There's a couple different brands that make these A5 length systems. BCM has their MK2 kit that you can buy, which is what I got. I found that to be the most cost effective. I think they were like $90 or something for the full kit, and you get everything you need. You get your A5 length buffer tube, you get your castle nut, they give you a nice little QD end plate here, and then of course the actual buffer and spring. And that's all you really need to swap your tube out. It's basically exactly the same as the carbine one, but everything's just a little bit longer. So the tube is a little bit longer. You use a rifle length buffer spring instead of a carbine length buffer spring. This is the old, this is what I had in the other, this is what I'm taking out. This is a Springco white spring with just a regular carbine 3-ounce buffer weight. And this is the BCM MK2. This is a T0, which is just means it has 4 steel weights. So the main difference in these is you can see the buffers are a little bit longer. The buffer weight in this A5 system is a little bit longer than the carbine system length buffer, and it's just basically just has more weight. So you have more weight combinations you can do because you have 4 weights in the A5 length buffer versus just 3 in the standard carbine buffer. So that's man, my hand's all dirty now from handling that. That's the main difference if people are wondering. Now the benefit of switching to the A5 system, in addition to having more combinations of buffer weights that you can play around with, is it's a longer stroke, so that's supposed to smooth out your recoil impulse. And I'm basically doing this to try to fix a short stroking issue on a 6-arc upper. So I want to switch to the A5 length in this lower, and then I'm going to slightly tweak the bolt carrier in the upper to a low mass carrier and try to keep the lower as cross compatible as possible, not have it tuned to one specific upper. But we'll see how it all plays out. So I'm just going to throw this in my tube here, and I'll just keep this on hand. Okay, let's make some space. Now to talk about these other things here, I also have some aeroshell grease. You can also probably use some, since there's not like high temperature stuff going on in this part of the gun, you could probably also use some of this or any other similar type of assembly grease. The reason why you want that is because you have a steel castle nut getting torqued down onto aluminum threads. And anytime you have different metals getting torqued down on each other, sometimes they can gall together and stick together. So it's always good to use some assembly grease to prevent them from sort of galvanizing together, I guess. I also have a Midwest Industries lower receiver block, which I'm going to show you. I'm going to do most of the work on that. There's also this this jig here from VISM, and it's basically like a lower receiver jig. This is optional. This is optional because this just makes sure that your buffer tube remains square. When you're torquing that down, it's 38 to 40 foot-pounds. So you are putting a good amount of rotational force. And sometimes when you're doing it, they can kind of clock this a little bit as you're torquing it, and then it doesn't necessarily affect the performance, but it's more of like a cosmetic thing. And I'm a little OCD, so I kind of like everything to be nice and square. But I don't really use this until I'm already basically done. Everything's assembled, and I just need to torque this castle nut down. The reason why I'm waiting is you have to remove the grip to put it in this jig, and I just don't feel like doing all that right now, but we'll get to that in the video. So that's what this is here. This is for me to remove the grip. This is a 3/16 bit, so that's for taking the grip off. This is a Tango uniform, I think it's called Echo Zulu Castle Nut Armorer's Kit. The most important thing I think in this kit is actually this spring-loaded center punch, which I use to stake the castle nut. And their actual castle nut wrench is really beefy and nice, which is good. And it has a little hole here for you to put the spring-loaded punch into. So it's kind of nice. You don't necessarily need, you can just use a hammer and a punch, but I think these kits are nice. I think the whole kit, the Armorer's Kit, is about $90. If you just want this, I think it's like 20. You could probably actually find these on Amazon for cheaper. This is a NEIKO, N-E-I-K-O spring-loaded center punch, but you can kind of see the tip here. So I actually like using these to witness mark cam pins on bull carriers as well. And then I have my torque wrench, so I'm gonna set this to about 40 foot-pounds. And I believe that's all of our parts here. So I'm gonna assemble most of this in the Midwest Industries lower receiver block, and then at the very end I'm going to throw the lower in this jig and use this to hold it. I might actually try to torque it down without that. As long as you have a free hand, you can hold this steady while you torque it, and it should keep it fairly square and not clock it at all. So I might actually just try that in the video. So before I go over there, I'm going to apply some assembly grease to these threads. And the main things you got to look at when you're swapping these out is when you remove the carbon length buffer tube. People also call these receiver extensions, depending on what your terminology is. You want to make sure you don't lose your buffer weight retainer pin, and then also your rear takedown pin spring may also kind of come out, because this end plate is kind of what keeps all that stuff together. So as you remove the end plate on the lower, just make sure you don't lose any of your internal springs and detents and stuff. Same thing with your grip. Like, that's why I'm waiting to take the grip off till the end, because if you take your grip out, you could lose your safety detent, and there's stuff that could go awry. So I'm trying to keep it as simple as possible. So I'm going to apply a little bit of grease here, and then well, actually, let's take a walk over here to the lower. I have it in my vise. Now, I already kind of broke the staking on the existing castle nut. You guys didn't really need to see me do that, but this was actually a semi-complete lower that I got from Primary Arms on, I don't know if it was a holiday sale or whatever, but it was semi-complete. It kind of came like this, but it had an A2 grip, so I swapped the grip out and put my own stock. It was a good deal. It already came with like most of the internals. I think the bolt catch was already in there, the takedown pins. It didn't have a trigger or a safety, so I put my own. So I think they realized that people swap a lot of stuff out anyway. I think it was like 150 bucks or something, but they're hard to find now. They're not really available. So as you can see, this Midwest lower receiver block holds it fairly well, but it still kind of wobbles around a little bit. But it just gives you an extra set of hands. And like I said, when you're torquing the castle nut down, you can kind of hold it so that this tube doesn't spin at all while you're torquing it down. But let's take this other castle nut off. And slide our end plate back a little bit here. And as soon as you start unscrewing, you can see the spring here kind of already getting exposed. This might be hard to see. But before you do this, obviously take your old buffer spring and buffer weight out of the tube. So I just did that as I was showing you the old tube. So I'm going to put my finger here on the buffer weight retaining pin so it doesn't fly out on me. Okay, there we go. Now it's just sitting there waiting for me to... Oh, and I just lost one of my springs. Ah, there it is. As I was just warning people, I totally forgot to cover this up properly. Stick that back in there. This is the spring for the rear takedown pin. All right. And they did use a little assembly grease here, so that's nice to see. And I will just keep this as a spare part. Here's our new one. And I'm going to put a little assembly grease on this before I start screwing it in. Just need a couple little dabs around the threads here. It doesn't get a lot of heat as part of the gun, as I mentioned, so you don't really need to like go too crazy on it, but you're mainly using it because you're torquing two different types of metal together with a good amount of force, so you don't want them to stick. Okay. I'm probably going to screw it in a little bit and back it out just to get the grease on the threads here. we go. And just so you guys see here, the order that you put these pieces in, you have to have your castle nut on first with the notches for the castle nut wrench facing towards you or towards the rear of the tube. And then you put your end plate, you slide your end plate on, and then you can screw it in. And once it starts to get close to your retaining pin here, you have to push it down and start screwing. And you want to try to get it as close as you can without it hitting it. That's a little too tight. It's starting to bite, so I gotta back this out a little bit. Just have to time it correctly. There we go. Now you can use the end plate to push the spring down as you tighten the castle nut by hand. And we're pretty much good to go. You can check your takedown pin, make sure that it's still functioning correct. Yep. And obviously at the very end, you just got to put your new A5 length buffer weight and buffer and rifle length spring in there. The standard is, usually people use a Spring Co Green, which is their standard strength rifle length spring. So that's the gist. I'm actually going to just hold this plate and I'm going to get a little bit more grease, actually. I'll be right back. Get a Q-tip. Okay. These little containers of grease will last you several years, depending on how built. It could last you a lifetime, depending on how many builds you do. So I'm just keeping pressure on this end plate so that it I don't lose my spring and stuff. So don't be losing those parts again. Okay. Now I just got to get my torque wrench and torque this to about 38 to 42 foot-pounds, which is the standard spec. And I'm going to use my little spring-loaded punch to do probably 2 stakes right here, here and here. And you can also make witness marks on there too. And we will get our castle nut wrench. Okay. My car is actually in the way of me torquing this, so I'm not gonna just torque. I'm not gonna torque it all the way down, but I think you guys understand the order of operations there. And the final part would be get your center punch. And I'm gonna wait till I actually torque it, but I'm gonna demonstrate here. You would put this right here by the notch and you hit it. You can kind of angle it a little bit like that towards the rear. And you just got to do that maybe 3 or 4 times. And once you get one notch, it's really easy to kind of just line it up. So those are the steps to basically swap out buffer tubes. Now you can do this if you want to replace a carbine length tube with another carbine, or replace a carbine with A5, or even replace it with a rifle length tube. So that's the gist of it. Thanks everyone. See you again next time.